you're unlike some of my other guests in that I think you are the first Agora Politics guest who is totally anonymous. And so congrats to you. One of my goals for the show, actually, starting back when I interviewed Josh Schollenberger, I believe in March, was to start having more anons on the show. And part of that is part of the reason why I want to have more anonymous personalities on the show was because there are certain things that they are allowed to say or that they're willing to say that individuals acting under their own identity will not or cannot in certain cases. And so it's always interesting to me the dynamics between sort of the anons and the non-anons that happens on Twitter. I actually the other week I hosted a conversation on Clubhouse that was about pseudonymity and varying shades of identity exposure that you can have on the internet. That was a quite an interesting conversation as well. We actually managed to get at least one sort of cybersecurity expert who talked a little bit about the varying degrees of interconnectedness with your actual identity that you could sort of leave online, whether you want to be whether you wanted to go by your identity or pseudonymously or anonymously. Those are sort of three varying levels of security control. So how do you think about the choice to, not only write under a pen name, but also to, maintain this sort of online anonymous persona?
Well, there are a few considerations. The first is that there really is no such thing as true anonymity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whether you talk about my phone, my computer, my browser, yeah, I use a VPN, but it doesn't matter. Like, if there are people in this world who, if they wanted that information, if they wanted to unmask me, they absolutely could. And that's true no matter who you are and what you do, though you can make it easier or harder. So I try to do everything I can to have what we call operational security. But I mean, ultimately, we're all sort of at the mercy of the people who own the pipes, the people who own the technology, Apple, Google, and people like that.
Yeah.
So, still, yeah, try to make it as hard as I can for them.
Well, I was going to say, I was sending out messages yesterday, and Twitter actually made me go ahead and finally verify my my phone number with them for my main account. And so I was like, dang, okay, guys, you're getting real serious about this. And the notification I got was that if you want to send messages to accounts that you don't follow, you need to verify your phone number. And of course, they already know all of my other accounts because I'm not going out of my way to sort of, compartmentalize those, at the level of physical devices or anything like that. But I did think it was interesting that they're sort of trying to, I do worry that ultimately they're going to close the gates on all of this stuff and really force everyone to at least identify who they are totally on the back end, if not outright in public.
Yeah, a lot of us do use burner phones, purchase cash for those who are really paranoid, and you can do varying degrees of obfuscation around that, but still, like, ultimately, people can find you. I think that what will happen, what has already happened, is something called social cooling. You may have heard this term. It's the idea that even without any kind of explicit rules about what you can and can't say, people are just increasingly fearful about talking around certain topics and sharing their honest opinions. Even if those opinions aren't harmful to anyone, we all just know certain things you can and can't say. And so what happens is the temperature of conversation just cools down, and we all sort of retreat into banal platitudes and pleasantries. We say exactly what we're allowed to say, and we don't venture off the reservation. That's what happens. And the more identity is tied to what you say online, the more that's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there is a a peer-to-peer mechanism that's in place, right? That's causing a kind of self-censorship on a massive scale. And I think it's slightly different depending on your national context. You know, there's certain things Americans are going to be more uncomfortable about than non-Americans. But of course, one of the problems with our sort of the monoculture globalization that's happening across the internet, and it's particularly across the Anglosphere, is that increasingly the topics that are taboo or that the things that can't be said in an American context are sort of leaking out into other parts of the world, and essentially among a certain class of people, they're all sort of aligning along the same kind of uh, moralistic values.
Right. The borders of the internet are much more porous than national borders or geographic borders. So it's really hard, unless like China has closed off their internet, for example, more or less, you can still break through, but it's harder. And sometimes I wonder, people have talked about, will we see every country, to the degree it's capable, sort of like walling off the internet? Could the internet ever have borders the way countries do? It's possible.